tutors, mentors, and the city with your host.com.
The City Tutors presents
Tutors, mentors, and the city
with your host.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kevin.com Brown, and welcome to Tutors, Mentors, and the City. And please join me in welcoming our guest for this episode, Mr. Doug Conant. Yay! Doug, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you so much for joining us, and I appreciate your time. So, Doug, my first question always depends on if something comes up that catches my eye. So we're here for the interview, and you have the very professional headset. You have the drop that says,
"You got it. I'm locked and loaded, baby. Look out."
You are absolutely locked and loaded. So ConantLeadership. Tell us what that is.
Well, I practiced leadership largely in corporate settings for about 40 years. And I noticed that most people that talk about leadership have never done it. And I wanted to be a voice of someone who's been there and done that and has walked 1,000 miles in everyday workers' shoes. You know, I started at the very bottom of the corporate ladder and went on to become a CEO and chairman. But most of my life, I was sitting in the equivalent of your audience, trying to learn and figure it out. And I think I've always had an appreciation for sharing my experience with others in a way that's helpful to them. But once I retired, I made that a full-time effort, and I created ConantLeadership. We're a boutique organization. Our mission, as the team likes to say, is about making meaning, not money. We charge for a few things, but very few. And if we make any money, we give it away to organizations that the staff feels are providing enlightened leadership in the 21st century. So over the last decade of doing this, we've given away millions of dollars to needy organizations championing what we would say leadership that works in the 21st century. So that's what we do. And I can't think of more fulfilling work. You know, there are lots of people that manage things in this world right now. There are very few that are practicing enlightened leadership. And so we're going to be championing leadership that works in the 21st century. And sadly, we're seeing a dearth of that politically and corporately. And that's our story.
Okay, great. Use the term enlightened leadership. Can you back that a little bit? What is enlightened?
Yeah, well, to me, enlightened leadership recognizes that there are two things that matter. And I'm way oversimplifying. We're 30,000 feet up here, Kevin. So be ready to grab the oxygen mask.
Okay.
But two things that matter: people and performance. And somehow we've gotten trapped in this conversation of chasing some perception of performance at the expense of people, not with people. And so we are trying to help all people be part of a process that leads to higher performance in a way that speaks to the people and the planet. And so, again, I'm at 30,000 feet here, but it's about people and performance. In my corporate work, I used to say, I still do, that you have to win in the workplace before you can win in the marketplace. And so you have to put people first. And if the people you're working with, if they genuinely believe that you care about them, then odds are they're going to care more fully about your agenda. But if they don't think you care, it's a fool's errand to expect that they're going to be jumping through hoops to deliver your agenda. And so what's job one? Job one is to care and care about everyone. And then that's just the opening ante. Then not only do you have to care, but you have to be competent and you have to show good character. You have to know what you're doing and you have to do what you say you're going to do. It's really not rocket science. We just get caught up, and you know this, we just get caught up in the thick of thin things. We get caught up in the issue of the day on Twitter, and that's not good enough. And so we really try and stay true to these higher aspirations and then encourage all leaders to have a higher ambition for their leadership journey. And so that's what enlightened leadership is all about.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. So you said you started this after you retired. What did you do before you retired? What was your occupation?
Well, I started at a food company, General Mills, and entry-level job, and then I ended up working for. I got fired from that job after about 10 years. I lost my job in a corporate downsizing. My wife doesn't like me to describe it as being fired, but let's face it, I was fired. If they wanted to keep me, they could have. So I felt fired. I can remember the day as if it was yesterday. I went into the office. The assistant said, "You need to go see the senior vice president." I went and saw him. He said, "Your job's been eliminated. You need to be out of here by noon." I'd worked for the company for nearly 10 years. And then I packed up my stuff and drove home to my wife, my two small children, and my very large mortgage, feeling every bit the victim. And that was welcome to the corporate world after 10 years of grinding it out. But then I went on to a very positive career with Kraft in Chicago. And then I was recruited into Nabisco, which was at the time part of the world's largest LBO, acquired by KKR. A book was written about it, Barbarians at the Gate. And I did that for 10 years. The last 5 years, I was president of Nabisco Foods. Then I was recruited to Campbell Soup Company, which was in dire straits, poorest performing major food company in the world, headquartered in the poorest, most dangerous city in the United States, Camden, New Jersey. We had 75,000 people in Camden, and we had 70 murders a year. It was crazy. So I was CEO there for a decade, and then I retired from there around in my early 60s, and I became chairman of Avon Products in New York for about 4 years. And while I was doing that, I was starting Conant Leadership. So that's my journey from the very bottom to ultimately the very top. And you know what? It was still the same deal. People first. You take care of people in a considerate, thoughtful way, and they take care of the agenda. Now, the only other thing I'll say about my journey, well, until you ask me another question, is that I also discovered that caring about people is not about just being kind. You do have to be tough-minded on standards while you're being tenderhearted with people. It's not like there's one or the other. My son was married in Memphis 2 years ago. I had a chance to go see all the sites of Memphis, including the place where Dr. King was slain. And here's a guy who was incredibly tough-minded on standards and incredibly compassionate at the same time. And that's the mindset I think you have to bring to your everyday life. If you compromise on your standards, it's a slippery slope. So you've got to maintain your standards, my experience. But at the same time, if you don't care about people, they're not going to care about your agenda. In a way, it's self-serving, but it's a much bigger idea than that. And so that was my journey from the beginning to the end. And fundamentally, the same principles were true then that are true today, my opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. So by your credentials, sounds like you're a powerhouse. You're the head of and the
Yeah.
CEO, leader of. So here's a question that pops in my head now. I
Yeah.
don't know how familiar you are with City Tutors. We are a not-for-profit startup.
Uh-huh.
We cater to New York City residents, citizens who are trying to upskill, right? So we provide free tutoring and free mentorship to typically communities that don't get all the resources that they are entitled to. Now, that being said, our biggest demographic is students from the CUNY system,
Sure.
which is anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000 students per year. They're about to graduate, recent graduates, getting ready to go into the world that you had so much experience in. Here's the question. How does someone become the CEO of a company they didn't start? What's the trajectory? What's the mindset? What's the skill set that they have to develop?
Well, Guy, if I had that answer, I'd write a book about it and I'd be on the New York Times bestseller list for the rest of my life. So a good question. First of all, I love New York. We were just there. We have a son actually that yesterday moved out of Greenwich Village at the age of 39, who has lived there for the last 15, 20 years. So we love New York City and we love what you're doing. So for the record, whatever answers I give you are going to feel like unreachable, because, let's face it, I didn't have any experience working in this world. My dad started this little plastic packaging company after World War II. I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman, but there was a scene in that where he's graduated from college, CUNY, and he doesn't know what he's going to do. And he goes to this party and this fella puts his arm around him and he says, "I have one word for you, son. One word: plastics." And it was right when plastic packaging was exploding. My dad basically started a little plastic packaging company in a cornfield and ran it himself. And but I didn't have corporate experience, just like everybody probably that's listening to this podcast. So I didn't know. I just tried to put one foot in front of the other. I do have this belief that, and this is going to sound hokey. Every time I say it, it sounds hokey, but I believe it. I believe the high road is the only road, and that you want to hold yourself to the highest imaginable standards in terms of your contribution profile. And that the more you lean into that notion, the more indispensable you become to whatever group you're part of. And the more indispensable you become, the more valued you become, the more opportunities come your way, either within that enterprise or beyond it. I worked for 4 companies in 40 years, one of which I was fired from. Another one, the company was sold, but I was just trying to do a little bit better today than I did yesterday. And I would tell you, and then I was always with an eye on doing a little bit better tomorrow than I did today. It sounds hokey, but I think that's the only way through this. I do believe you have to have a sense of intention with what you do. Like it wasn't about getting ahead for me. I thought that would be a byproduct. It was just about being helpful. And if I helped out today, they'd appreciate me a little more. So I found I wrote a book about this called Touch Points. And the first question you ask is, how can I help every day? How can I help? And then you help. And then guess what? They appreciate you. And then opportunities come your way. But my gosh, it's a tough world out there. I do think you have to have an intention. You know, I deal with I mentor a lot of people, and they're sort of doing this life. They feel like they're victims of, I'm overwhelmed. You know, the world's crazy. They call it a VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. That was a term that Warren Bennis came up with in 1987, before the internet. And now it's a VUCA world on steroids. In fact, there's a new term for it because this generation wants to create their own terms. It's called BANI, B-A-N-I, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. And that's the world that all your people you're mentoring are trying to get into. How do I get traction in this cockamamie world? Well, you can't do it by the seat of your pants. I'll tell you that, because you'll get overwhelmed. You have to have your rudder in the water and intention. I want to contribute in this way to this place, and I'm going to do it with a sense of perseverance, and you find your way. Easy to say, hard to do.
Well, actually, not so easy to say. I'm taking notes on VUCA and the other
BANI, B-A-N-I. That's the new one. You can be the first on your block to talk about a BANI world.
Yes, absolutely. So now, that being said, what we focus on at Tutors Mentors in the City is your human journey. Okay.
Yeah.
So we know where your destination, you have arrived at your destination, but what formed as a young man, what formed this byproduct, right?
Yeah.
So where are you from? Where were you born?
I was born in a little suburb of Chicago, 10,000 people. And, but it was right outside Chicago. I'm a diehard Chicago sports fan. So, you know, Michael Jordan, I was living there I was living the dream when Michael Jordan was on the Bulls and I was in Chicago. But so I'm from Chicago.
Absolutely. Chicago had a lot to cheer about when it comes to sports. Public school or private school?
Public school.
Okay. So what did you do for fun? What did young Doug do for fun?
Sports, basketball. And I'm an introvert. I know you may not know that from this, but it turned out I was not a team sport guy. I was a loner. So I got into the sport of tennis, and I found I could hit a tennis ball against a wall all day by myself. And it was just me. And I could sort of get into a rhythm that is really comfortable for an introvert. And so I did that. It turned out I got to be pretty good at hitting a ball against a wall. And ultimately, I got a scholarship to Northwestern University to play tennis in the Big Ten. And ultimately, I was able to stay there and go straight to graduate school and work for the athletic department and get my graduate school paid for by tennis. So sports became really sports in school were the center of my life. And I was so lucky to get the scholarship to go to Northwestern that I really appreciated it and tried to make the most of that the 7 years I was there.
Absolutely. What did you major in?
Political science.
All right. So you went to, you got a
It was the early 70s. It was right around when Kent State happened. And it was a tumultuous time on college campuses. And
right.
political science made a lot of sense to me at that point in time.
Protest was everywhere. Protest was
Yeah.
okay. So bachelor's in political science, and did you go to grad school?
I went to grad school, again, at Northwestern. I got an MBA at Northwestern while I worked for the athletic department. So I was done with school by the time I was like 24, which, you know, with a graduate degree, which was great. But it was right around when there was a wage price freeze at the time and nobody was hiring. So you felt lucky to get a job coming out of school. And that's when I was recruited to General Mills in I thought Chicago was cold. And then I went to Minneapolis and I discovered what cold really is. And that's where I started my career.
Okay. So the leaps you made sound phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
How do you, I speak to quite a few people during using this podcast platform.
Yeah.
They're executive directors, they're VPs, they're executive, chairs,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody says, yeah, I, got my bachelor's, got my master's, and then I became the CEO of Nabisco or something like,
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Well, I actually wrote a book about this because I think the seeds of greatness are in all of us. And the challenge is to help people unleash their full potential. And I believe, and where I start, I wrote a book called The Blueprint, How to Lift Your Leadership Contributions to New Heights. And I believe your life story is your leadership story. And you've forgotten more about your life story than you remember. We all have these life lessons, and then we move into the quote unquote real world, and we start trying to be what we think the real world wants us to be, and we forget who we are. And so what I do, the first step is, because I believe in the power of intention, so you've got to have this intention of being yourself and then finding a way to be yourself and meet the needs of others. So I start with, I have everybody write their entire life story down and go into every nook and cranny of it they've got. And we've simplified it in the book so that it's more approachable than that. But if you go into your life story and you talk about your family history, and you're going to find stories of how people have persevered and survived in the face of, terrible situations. My family came here from the Irish potato famine. And also they were escaping religious persecution in England, and they persevered. I thought I had it hard when I lost my job. My God, that was nothing compared to what my family went through. But they persevered and they survived. And what did I learn from that? What did I learn from my grandmother and my grandfather and my uncle and my aunt? What are all these lessons from my family life story? And, when I dug into that, I thought I was feeling sorry for myself because I'd lost my job. When I dug into my roots, my family history, I said, my gosh, this family is amazing. They've persevered through challenges so much greater than mine. What can I learn from that? I'm a chip off that block. I've got it in me to make it through. what are the lessons learned, and how do I want to bring them to the forefront of how I show up for people, as opposed to leaving them in the parking lot of my life history? I can do better than this. Shame on me. And so I started trying to live into my life history in a way that my grandparents would be proud of me, and I could be proud of myself. And that's where I think you start. You've got it in you. You've got your life story. I've got mine. Everyone I work with has a different story. Everyone. I've worked with thousands of people now. And part of the process I go through, after you write your life story and you reflect and you study, you actually build something we call a leadership model, which is how you want to show up for people in a way that speaks to you. Put another way, it's how you're going to be the best version of yourself. And what I find is no two of those leadership models are the same. They're all different. And I have people build those models from their life story and from looking at the world around them. What can they learn? And then I have them try to start showing up that way. And I was on a Brene Brown podcast a couple years ago, or maybe a couple years ago. And she has this great quote, which had become my quote before I ever met her. I talked about her. That's how, anyway, her quote was, look, you can either stand inside of your story and own it, or you can stand outside of your story and hustle for your worthiness every day. I was an oldest. I was not in my story. I was trying to be the kid my parents wanted me to be, which wasn't the kid I was. And then I was trying to be the kid my teachers wanted me to be, my coaches, my professors, my bosses. I was trying to live up to all these expectations. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. I was leaving myself back in the parking lot. And this was not fulfilling. I was hustling for my worthiness with all these voices out there. Nobody was looking at the world through my eyes and my sensibilities. And then I realized, well, I have to do that. I can't, nobody else can do this. I'm the only one. So I got to dig into my life story, figure out what it means to me, and I got to get on that track. And so that's how I think you get there. I think you go find the seeds of greatness that are already in you, and you identify them, you build a plan to build on them, and you go after it. I don't know any other way. And it's the only way. That's what I did. And let me tell you, I never thought I would be sitting here talking about this stuff with you. I was just happy to go to college. I was just happy to be able to get graduate school paid for. I was just happy to go to Minneapolis and have a job and not knowing anybody in the state of Minnesota. But I was putting one foot in front of the other, and I was trying to be true to myself while I was trying to meet the needs of others. Quite frankly, I'm rambling here, but when I got fired, I was so busy trying to make everybody else happy, I wasn't showing up the way I needed to show up. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I wasn't doing a lot right. And it's because I wasn't living into the best version of myself. I was trying to make everybody else happy.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, here's a question. So, like I mentioned before, we provide tutoring and mentorship, free tutoring and mentorship. When you ran into those roadblocks, when you are fired, like you mentioned, you're fired, you have this huge mortgage.
Oh, God.
Who do you turn to for advice and counsel at that stage?
Well, I'll tell you, and I think this is true of all of us. We think nobody understands me. Nobody, and especially guys, we don't talk about it with each other, right? No, it feels incredibly lonely, incredibly lonely. So I got fired. And the greatest gift when I got fired was that they gave me an outplacement counselor. And he had me write my life story. That's the first thing he had me do, which was a revelation. I'm going back 30 or a long time ago, almost 40 years ago. And he read my life story, and he spent a few weeks with me, and he said, Doug, I don't get it. You come from this amazing family who persevered through hell to create opportunities for you. And you were almost a world-class tennis player, a competitor, but you show up at work and it feels like you're just going along to get along. You're just waiting to tell me what I want to hear. What's going on here? And he said, you've got to find your footing here before you can start to change the world you live in. You have to change the way you approach it. And you have to become yourself. And Warren Bennis, who became a mentor of mine, he said, look, becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. It's precisely that simple. It is also that difficult. And it was hard for me to do that. He said, one thing he had me do was build a network. I call it now an entourage of excellence. He said, this doesn't have to be lonely. There are plenty of people who would talk to you. You're just not talking to them. You got to get over yourself here. You know, you have family members, you have trusted advisors who you just don't talk to about this stuff. And as long as you're respectful and don't overstay your welcome with them or don't make it too inconvenient, they're going to help you as much as you need to be helped. But you got to open this journey up, and you got to create a community that's on this journey with you. It's only lonely if you let it be. And wow, I'm an introvert who just wants to hit a ball against a wall by myself. And here's the guy who's saying, you got to knock this wall down, baby. You've got to open up. You've got to create a core group of people who you can talk to about this stuff. And so what I tell people is when you get to those thick of thin things, you don't want to be alone. You want to already have your community in place. And the time to build this entourage of excellence is before you need it, not when you need it. You got to have this community who are there with you so that when the shit hits the fan, which it will do, you can go say, you're not going to believe what just happened. And they're going to get it because they get you. And they know your journey, and they know what you're trying to do. And they're going to admire you for that. And they're going to say, okay, how can I help? And by the way, I found that as I created that network, which was 10 years into my career, it was one of the most fulfilling things I ever did. And some of the people that I met in 1983, I guess around 1983, are still part of my network today. And we still talk. And I'm there for them when they need me. And I can't tell you, there's not a more fulfilling thing in the world. And all I had to do, I was just getting in the way. All I had to do was ask and talk to them. It wasn't like somebody said, well, you can't talk to them. It was like, I felt like an idiot when I look back on it. I could have been traveling this road with people who loved me, who cared about me, who wanted me to realize all the fruits of my labor. And here I am, poor, pitiful Patty, saying, nobody understands me. It's so lonely. Bullshit.
That, it sounds like when they fired you, they did you a favor.
Well, they did, but I didn't know it. And I was scared. I mean, we had just moved to Boston to do this job. I didn't know anybody in Boston. It was a subsidiary of General Mills. And, we were all alone there. And all of a sudden I'm there and I've lost my job. And yeah, it was, but I don't know about you, but those, what do they call them? Well, I'm losing the thought now. Those challenging moments, how you respond to them sort of defines your life journey, you know, and I had to double down. I didn't have a choice. I had to get a job. I had to be all over this thing. And I evidently I rose to the challenge, just like my ancestors had when they came to this country, and they had to rise to the challenge. So I look back now and I'm not doing anything particularly special in my family. I'm just doing what they did for generations before I got here, just on a different level.
Right, right. Okay, okay, outstanding. So this 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 pivotal moment. Okay, you
Yeah.
learn you have to build your village. When did you have an aha moment after that? Like you were it was darkness. You got this out out outreach person. I forgot what you called him.
Outplacement person.
Out,
He was there to help me find a job. Yeah.
yes. So okay. So was the finding of the job the moment that changed everything? What did something accompany that? What
No,
was
no. Look, Stephen Covey, who I had a chance to know before he passed away, uh, had this line. I'm sure it wasn't his line, but I heard it from him. He said, Doug, look, you can't talk your way out of something you behaved your way into. You got to behave your way out of it. And when I lost my job, I was in my early 30s, and I had behaved my way into kind of the way I showed up, you know? And it's not like, okay, I hit the switch and I'm going to do differently now. You know, I'm still working on it. I'm still a work in process at the age of 72. So but I did have, when I lost my job, when I went through this experience, it was all about just getting a job and being able to pay the mortgage and providing my family some stability. That was everything. I don't want to say all of a sudden I had a eureka moment. But I did learn from that experience that I could do more than I thought I could do, that I could be more like myself than I thought I could be. And I sort of liked that version of myself, felt a little better about it. And so I started living into that version. And I'm still, as I said, we're talking 40 years later, I'm still working on it, but I've been living into it. Not an aha moment, but I will tell you though, that when I had a chance to start repaying the favors that people had shown me when I was looking for a job, when I had a chance to start, when they were looking for a job and I had a job, when I had a chance to help out, boy, that's when I realized a full circle moment. They were there for me. I can be there for them. We've got this thing going where the more I'm there for them, the more they're there for me. Maybe the world could work this way. Maybe it's not just about me and John Q. Public. Maybe that's the way the world's supposed to work. I be there for them, they be there for me. And the more I'm there for them, the more they're there for me. Maybe there's something to this, And, my mother had dragged me to church for my whole childhood. And I think my Christian experience was lost on me at that stage. But I started to live into that part of my life as well with my young family. And it makes a whole lot more sense to me today than it did when I was 12 years old. I'll tell you that.
absolutely, absolutely outstanding? Okay, so you have given us in this conversation you've dropped so many jewels on us. You have given us so many tidbits and strategies for leadership and life. But you gave them in your presentation of who you are.
Yeah.
If I ask you a direct question of what's the best advice you ever received, what would your response be?
How can I help? When I mentioned that earlier, it's foundational in my first book, Touch Points. But when I got that, it was the day I'd been fired from my job. And I called the outplacement counselor. His name was Neil McKenna. He's part of my entourage of excellence. He's part of my crew. He's passed away. But I called this is before cell phones. I mean, I'm old. This is landlines, no caller ID. You would call his office. I called it like 4:30 or 5 that day, and he answered the phone. And I said, Mr. McKenna, I've been given your name to schedule an outplacement meeting. He said, I want you to come over here right now. I said, I understand, but it's almost dinner time. I appreciate that. I'd be happy to just make an appointment. He said, no, I want you over here right now. But when he answered the phone, here's how he answered the phone, not knowing who was on the other end. He said, hello, this is Neil McKenna. How can I help? And for the rest of his life, and he was one of my mentors for 20 years, for the rest of his life, every time I called his phone number, he would say, hello, this is Neil McKenna. How can I help? You could have been the plumber or somebody trying to deliver a package to the house, trying to get the right address. But when you called him, he was there to help. And quite frankly, when I called him that first time, I desperately needed somebody to be there to help because I was alone, I was overwhelmed, and he was there. And if there's anything I commend to anyone in your audience, if you bring a how can I help mentality to every interaction, it will change your life. It will change your life. The more you help them, the more they help you, the better the world you create. So if there's one thought I leave people with, it's how can I help?
Wow. Okay. So, that's almost a perfect note to end. That's almost a perfect note to end the interview. And I don't want to mess it up. So you know what? I'm going to stop right there.
Yeah.
And I'll say, Doug, OMG, thank you so much. I have so many jewels. I have my phone in my hand and I'm texting notes to myself.
There you go. Hey, well, I admire what you're doing and what you're endeavoring to do in the city. And I'll be cheering you on from the sidelines. I'm sort of on the sidelines now, but let's do this again sometime. Let's carry the conversation. You're doing important work, and maybe I can't be there shoulder to shoulder with you, but I will be with you in spirit, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. You are definitely with us in more than spirit. The things you shared, man, were phenomenal, subtle, and phenomenal, and intentional, and much appreciated. OMG.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate it.
You bet.
All right. See you on the next one.
You got it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.